How are you?
Good.
Doing well, doing well.
All
Yeah,
right, so
been
let's jump
excited to
off.
talk.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this project. Matthew, how did this all start for you?
Yeah, actually, it started with a call from Fisher one day. He read an article about the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club that was devastated by COVID and the effects of Mardi Gras back in 2020. Fisher and I worked together back in 2016 on a film that he directed called Before the Flood. And we were always trying to find a way to work together on a project again. We really appreciated the collaboration. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, I just finished a movie called Palmer that shot in New Orleans with Justin Timberlake. I it was introduced to the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, and I just read this article. You should take a read, and I think there's a story here. Are you willing to jump in a car and drive to New Orleans with me and start to mine this story?" And right, this is the summer of COVID. This is just a few weeks after George Floyd was murdered, and I was eager to do something. And this something turned into a 5-year journey that resulted in A King Like Me, an incredible film that really gives you a window into not only New Orleans culture, not only the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, but to the life of Black people in America. So I was extremely honored to receive that call and to be able to make this project.
Fisher, why do you like working with Matthew, first of all? Like you had another project with him and you said, okay, this is the guy I'm going to call.
Uh, I love Matt's energy. I love his commitment. He told me he wanted to direct. He hadn't had an opportunity to direct before. I was really, restless. Also, like Matt, wanted to do something. Felt like very unsatisfied with the world with COVID and George Floyd and all this madness going on. So when we went down to New Orleans in the car, we didn't even know who was going to direct, what was going to happen, and watching Matt ask the questions of the subjects, watching Matt organizing the shoot, I was like, "You're ready, dude. This is it." And we got a story here, and we knew, and it was just like a beautiful moment and lucky moment because everybody was free. I mean, I was on the TV show
Yeah.
Succession at the time. We were, obviously we shut down. Matt had a full-time job with a company. He was shut down. And it just, after that first trip of 6 or 18 interviews we did, we raised money and we were off to the races. It just happened to take a long time because we didn't want to make a movie just about COVID in the end.
Yeah.
It morphed into a much bigger story. COVID has become a much smaller part of this movie. So we had to re-engineer and reshoot. And Matt went down and basically lived in New Orleans on and off for many, many years. And we just got lucky. And now Matt and I want to do something else together.
Matthew, I had another guest on that just wrote a book regarding or re-releasing a book for the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. So you think about specifically what New Orleans has been through
Yeah.
and she's a big levee against, she sued the levees and all this. It's an amazing story. Perfect to put on the whole radio show, put our interview and then that interview as well on the same show. But when you think about specifically enough, Matthew, just what New Orleans has gone through, they didn't need another thing with COVID and some of the other tragedies from because they didn't really recover from Katrina.
Right. Yeah, it's true. I mean, even filming down there, as I think one of our last shoots down there was in 2024, 2023, excuse me. And you still see the effects of Hurricane Katrina, in New Orleans to this day. But what I think allowed New Orleans to not quite fully recover, but to bounce back is the resilience of individuals that live in New Orleans. And I think one of the reasons why that resiliency is so strong is because there is such a tie to the soil of New Orleans. A lot of our participants in our film, especially the Black participants, can trace their lineage back 6, 7, sometimes 8 generations. When there's such a tangible pull to the place that you live, when there's such a connection to the history of where you come from, especially for Black Americans in this country, it makes you fight that much harder to not only just survive, but to thrive, to build upon tragedy, to create beauty. And that's what we saw, through the course of making this film. That yes, New Orleans has been through a lot. But New Orleans has produced some of the most amazing culture and cultural experiences that this country offers. And I think that's one of the reasons why New Orleans is a jewel in the South. It is seen as a place where tourists from all around the world come to experience the culture. There's a reason why. It's because of the pride, of the love, the joy that Native New Orleanians have for the place that they live.
And that's the key component. Fisher, what did you learn most about making this film?
You know, I've been to New Orleans many times as a tourist, Jazz Fest. I shot a couple little documentaries down there. But when I got there on this journey with Matt, the first time we shot, I realized I didn't know anything about it. What my perspective was so kind of warped and touristy, like a tourist. And the experience of spending time with these people that not only have lived in the city their whole life, but are culturally important to the city, whether it's a Zulu member or whether it's someone running an arts center or Aish, a doctor. I learned like that these people are more American in a lot of ways than any Americans I've ever met, as Matt said, because they've been in this country, they're seventh generation. And also just to hear these stories of people living here their whole lives, but really living here. Not these aren't people in the tourist industry. These are people that live every day, work every day, whether they're working for the government, the local government, or whether they're contractors or construction workers or dog catchers, whatever. I just fell in love with the community. And I learned also beyond New Orleans, if you have a community that you are engaged with, you are a happier person. You are feeling more supported. And the community that the Zulu Club creates for its members is a beautiful thing. And it's made me look at my community here in New York and feel more grateful and try to coalesce more of a community where I live now in Brooklyn.
So, Matthew, when you think about Mardi Gras, people just don't know the backstory of it, right? They just show up, they go to party, enjoy, celebrate, and leave and not understand the whole backstory. And that's what this documentary brings to the table, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does. And for me, it was a great opportunity because I also was one of those individuals who knew nothing about Mardi Gras except for what I saw in mainstream media. And what do you see in mainstream media regarding Mardi Gras? You see Bourbon Street. That's all I knew. I didn't know about the neighborhood parades. I didn't know about the origins of the Social Aid and Pleasure Club. So not being a native New Orleanian and making this film, it allowed a curiosity, where I was able to, and the team around me, including Fisher, we were able to really do a deep dive on the origins of Mardi Gras. And as with a lot of things, unfortunately, in this country, some of the early origins of a lot of these story traditions come from extremely segregated and racist places. But what we were able to do throughout the course of this film is not uncover, but to investigate and to pull in a history of Mardi Gras and celebration and carnival that is maybe for the purposes of this film exclusive to New Orleans, but also translates to carnival culture like throughout the world. And one of my favorite things about this film after its release is the amount of comments we're getting, even from native New Orleanians, even from people from Louisiana who have attended Mardi Gras their entire life, but all the things that they learned about the history of Mardi Gras and the history of Zulu Club, a Mardi Gras crew that they absolutely love, but didn't know about some of their early origins. So it was an incredibly interesting and fun deep dive into a history that I didn't know that much about, but really translates on the screen to produce this beautiful thread that is the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club.
Yeah,
And
the history of Mardi Gras is fascinating, and the Mardi Gras king was basically post Civil War to keep the population's understanding that we still are kings, white people are still kings, and then the Zulu Club also has a whole history itself of that black people weren't allowed to wear masks, so you couldn't parade back in 1909 when it was founded. And so what they did was they painted their faces black to kind of be allowed to parade. And we get into all of that stuff. So there's an incredible history lesson to be learned, which we loved
Yeah.
and I think we tell it in a very fun and interesting way. It's not medicine at all. It's very entertaining and
Right.
enlightening.
I learned a lot from watching Your Honor on Netflix, which came on Showtime, basically about New Orleans. So this gave me a little bit more of a backstory to interview you guys, Matthew and Fisher, because I didn't know how backwards things were in New Orleans. So a lot of that in that series showed that, our
Mhm.
law enforcement, everything. And there was a couple other New Orleans ones as well. So everyone needs to check it out. I mean, again, it's now available on Netflix, and I appreciate you guys coming by and coming on and talking about this. I'm definitely going to check it out. A King Like Me, now available on Netflix. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.